Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming back so quickly, and hopefully you're nourished with some snacks. Welcome to Brainwaves from Brainwaves to Breakthroughs, AI and BCI. I'm JoJo Platt. I'm a senior contributing editor at Neurotech Reports, and it's a pleasure to moderate this session about the most exciting frontier and buzzworthy session of our program this year, where AI meets neurotechnology. Today, we're going to explore how decoding adaptive algorithms and neuroadaptive systems are reshaping what's possible, from restoring movement and speech to creating new ways to understand emotion and cognition. I'm joined by three remarkable speakers. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tatiana Alexandrova. She's the founder and CEO of Subsense, a very new firm on the scene. She's building next generation neuroadaptive systems that sense and respond to challenges and interactions between human cognition and the technology we use in the world around us. Oliver Armitage, Vice President of Neural Data at Axsoft, is driving breakthroughs in soft implant interfaces and real-time neural decoding. And finally, Andreas Forsland, who shared his either primary or secondary debut of cognition here at our COVID edition of Neurotech Leaders Forum. Cognition is using AI-powered BCI for communications and systems to redefine accessibility and communications. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to take the stand and give us a little bit of background and information on their companies, and then we'll get into some Q&A. I think we have some good topics. Hopefully you guys too. We'll have some good questions. And I'll start with Dr. Alexandrova with Subsense.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a big pleasure. And where is the clicker? Here it is. Let's start. Okay, a couple of words about me. My name is Tatiana Alexandrova. I'm first-time founder, second-time brain-computer interface company founder, and my very first company was completely non-invasive. I grew up wanted to be a chemist, and now I lead a chemistry-driven neurotech company. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a doctor. It's fun. I don't have a PhD. I'm not even a scientist, but I'm assisting my team in the lab. And as a kid, I dreamed of living 10 parallel lives, and right now I'm trying to make it happen. Okay, so why we're doing of what we're doing at Subsense. Here you can see two very famous TV show. If some of you haven't watched it yet, highly recommend it. It's a Black Mirror and it's free body problem. And as I said, I've always been a dreamer, and eventually our vision is to unite technology and humanity. And another reason why we're doing what we're doing, and it's great that our session is connected to AI, I truly believe that we are living in the era of uncertainty. And why? Because of models become smarter, AI models, large language models become smarter and smarter. And it's creating a bigger and bigger gap between AI and humanity. And I believe that if one day we can connect human brain and AI, it means that every model that will become smarter will evolve humanity the same moment. So we have a very futuristic vision in terms of uniting humanity and technology, but of course we're thinking down to earth as well. And how will BCI help those in need in 3-5 years? We believe that it's helping patients with ALS, MS, use computer and communicate with their loved ones, operate mobility devices and prosthetic. For neuromodulation, and our system is bidirectional. I will tell more about that a little bit later. For neuromodulation, we managing symptoms of Parkinson, epilepsy, and Alzheimer. And actually, this is our first indication that we're planning to execute. It's to treat symptoms of Parkinson or epilepsy. We're choosing right now. Also treating chronic pain, addiction, depression, and anxiety, and restoring motor and sensory function. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I've been to a couple of sessions today here, and we talk a lot about implanted or invasive BCI and non-invasive BCI. And I guess the audience know the limitation of each of these methods. And for example, implanted BCI, if we're talking about healthy individuals, surgery is a thing. And basically, healthy people would prefer not to have surgery. And regarding the non-invasive BCI, if we're talking about the sci-fi movies and uniting technology and humanity, as I had completely non-invasive BCI company before, I truly don't believe that in the nearest future, the completely non-invasive BCI would be able to deliver like a sci-fi vision. That's why we were trying, by we, I mean my team and I, we were trying to find the way how to make BCI non-surgical, but in contact with the neural tissue, so the accuracy of BCI would be the same as a classic invasive method, wireless signal transmission, and bidirectional. And we found the way. And the way is nanoparticles. So in substance, we create nanoparticles that comes to the brain intranasally and not require surgery in contact with neural tissue, wireless signal transmission, and bidirectional. How our system works. This is three components. One nanoparticles for neural reading, one nanoparticle for neuromodulation. They're completely different, and I will tell more about them. And wearable hardware. If you don't wear this hardware, nothing going on. It means that nanoparticles just stay in your brain and not interact with the brain at all. And it comes to your brain intranasally or through the blood, bypassing the brain-blood barrier. So the size of our nanoparticles is less than 100 nanometers. Now, how does it work? For neurostimulation, we use magnetoelectrical nanoparticles, and it means that we influence with our wearable device, we influence nanoparticles with the magnetic fields. And because of the piezoelectric effect, the shape of the nanoparticles is changing, and it creates the electricity around these nanoparticles. So it stimulates neurons around. For neural reading, we use completely different nanoparticles. We produce near-infrared light with our device to the nanoparticles, and then the light is scattering from the nanoparticles back with a certain frequency. But if there is some neuron activity around these nanoparticles, the frequency of this light is changing. That's how we know that there is activity around the nanoparticles. So why they're the future of BCI? And if you remember my presentation called the future platform of BCI, why the platform is because the first indication, as I said, that we plan to execute is treating the symptoms of Parkinson or epilepsy, but we are building the platform to let other developers to build other application and indication based on our technology so we can move forward very fast to the healthy individuals. So why it's future? Because it's non-surgical installation via brain-blood barrier or intranasally, efficient energy transfer between electrode and tissue, efficient mechanism of wireless communication. And I remember in one slide it was no wires, please. Here it is. And tunability, because we can really tune our nanoparticles based on what we need from them. We're not the only one who do this nanoparticles, who develop these nanoparticles. Our development is based on more than 100 papers that have been published around the world. And nanoparticles are already widely used in medicine, as you can see, cancer treatment, orthopedics, vaccines, wound care. So this is something very noble for people. Our timeline, where we are. Right now, we are on the proof of concept stage, so we are developing these nanoparticles. And basically, 70% of what we're doing is we're transferring basic science into the product. And next year, we want to show how we can treat symptoms of epilepsy or Parkinson in mice in the end of next year. Then the next stage for us, we call it MVP because our final product for healthy individuals, it's a medical product. And the next stage where we're aiming to get fast is working with the healthy individuals. We have a great collaborators that we work with. It's ETH Zurich. They're basically the best lab we know for magnetoelectrical nanoparticles, and they develop fundamental science for us with magnetoelectrical nanoparticles. We also work with UC St. Cruz, Ali Yannick, and we work with them for plasmonic nanoparticles. This is our R&D team, all PhDs. A great team. And we have Scott Meek here from R&D team. This is our head of R&D. He's here. So if you have any scientific or R&D question, he would be very happy to meet you and talk and tell more about what we're doing. The results. So far, we raised more than 25 million in seed round. We initiated joint development with our collaborators that I talk about. Build up R&D team lab in Palo Alto. Please, if you like, visit us. It's a really beautiful place. Develop new nanoparticles that are designed for translation, not just science. Initiated in vivo and animal testing already. So what's ahead? We will have further mice stimulation experiments this year in Q4. We will do experiments in pigs next year. We will do disease models in 2026 in mice, and of course building connection and hiring. So if you know somebody who might be interested to work in a very visionary company, we would love to talk to them. And raising Series A in the end of 2026. This is it. Thank you very much.
Hello. There we go. Okay, so back in 2016, I saw an image and a clip on BBC News that I think probably everyone in this room saw. You probably saw it on NBC News, but in that clip, Barack Obama, the last president that we could all have a conversation about, fist bumps Nathan Copeland, who is wearing a prosthetic hand controlled by a Utah array from our friends here at BlackRock. And that was a huge moment for neurotech. That was obviously the result of a lot of work by BlackRock and by a lot of funding from Obama and the Brain Initiative. And in that clip, I was, when that clip came out, I was just finishing up my PhD, and everyone I knew was a grad student. And so what I saw in that clip, what really stood out to me, was not just Barack Obama fist bumping Nathan Copeland's prosthesis, but the server rack that was in the background of the shot, and a blonde lady who I could clearly tell was a grad student, sat there making the whole thing work. And I, obviously, as a grad student, identified with that lady. And what I saw in that room at that time was a wonderful piece of experiment, and very clearly not a product. That was a demonstration of what AI and BCI can do, but it was not a demonstration of something that scales into the world that could go to even thousands of people, let alone tens or hundreds of thousands of people. And that is a problem that I sort of internalized and have sat with me for the entire time. So I think AI and BCI can solve that problem, and I'm going to talk about that here. So I'm Oliver. I work at Axsoft as running the data and clinical strategy. At Axsoft, we have built brain implants from a proprietary new material called fluoron. Fluoron is spun out from Harvard and Stanford. It is designed from the ground up to be a photo-patternable lithographic polymer that you can make a soft brain implant from that you can see here draped across one of our team's finger, and the polymer is the clear space between the gold traces. So fluoron is about 10,000 times softer than polyamide Kapton, which is what other flexible arrays are made from, and it's fully photolithographical, can be done with photolithography, and it's fully owned by Axoft. We licensed it out of Harvard and Stanford, and it was created by our co-founder, Jia Lu. Fluoron earlier this year was on the cover of Nature. We had a implant that was injected into the developing brain of a tadpole, and that bioelectronic implant was able to sit within the brain and map the neural activity of that tadpole over the next few weeks as it grew. And that's because fluoron is basically so soft that it will happily integrate with brain tissue and you don't get any immune or glial response around it. And we have similar results in implants in rats and pigs and even recently in humans. So what we're doing at Axoft is we're taking those soft, flexible brain implants made from fluoron, and we're going after the disease of coma, disorders of consciousness, as it's known in the medical literature. So disorders of consciousness is a very significant issue. About 680,000 patients will enter some form of multi-hour or multi-day coma in US and UK per year. And importantly, it is assessed right now with a bedside questionnaire. So the way you tell how much preserved activity a patient has who has a disorder of consciousness is you try and ask them questions, you flash a light near them, and you see what level they respond. So unsurprisingly, this results in a very high misdiagnosis rate. And terrifyingly, about 25% of those patients will score a 0 on the questionnaire. They have absolutely no observable response to any apparent stimuli. But if you put them in an fMRI and say to them, hey, Oliver, play tennis with your left hand, play tennis with your right hand, they can do that. So they can hear you, they can understand you, they can try and act on that activity, but there's no observable motor output. And this is called cognitive motor dissociation or covert consciousness. There was a very big paper came out with about 500 of these patients in late 2024. It was picked up in the New York Times earlier this year. And recognition of this kind of like medical burden of the disorder of coma is really just picking up right now. The unmet need in these coma patients is about a continuous and reliable diagnostic. It has to work straight out of the box every time. And ultimately then getting to communication for these patients who are in there with preserved cognition, and then restoring consciousness. And there is a very significant group of neurologists and KOL clinicians trying to provide better solutions to these patients. So at Axoft, we are building a brain foundation model of consciousness. The fundamental advantage of fluoron-based electrodes is that, yes, we get single neuron and LFP data, but in addition to that, because the electrode is so soft, it doesn't drift relative to the neurons in the brain. So we track the same neuron on the same electrode over 9 months in a rat, and we track the same neuron on the same electrode as the brain wobbles with blood pressure in a human over the last couple of months in Panama. And so because of that, you can get very, very stable single neuron data. And another advantage of fluoron is that it is fundamentally a better dielectric. So as an insulator for your electrical traces, you have a lower noise floor on the data coming off a fluoron-based implant. So with a fluoron implant, we are able to implant to both depth and cortical regions and get data associated with the substrate of consciousness. And in this case, I'm talking about consciousness from the scientific perspective rather than philosophical. So I'm talking about, can they hear me? Can they feel me? Are they going to wake up? Will they be neurologically normal? And in this case, one of the ways of assessing consciousness is what stimuli, sensory stimuli, you pay attention to. So right now, hopefully, you're mainly thinking about visual and auditory cues coming from this talk, and not the tactile response of how your clothes feel on your arms. But your brain can switch attention to that, and that switching happens in your thalamus. So by getting access to both thalamocortical data, we can very significantly diagnose which of these sub-features of consciousness are being preserved in any individual patient. So you can answer those kind of essential clinical questions. Can they feel me? Can they hear me? With that, we can then build this foundation model of consciousness. So we've completed our first in-human clinical study. This is an acute intraoperative study with 5 patients in the Panama clinic. The fluoron probe, you can see here in the top left, it's the slightly oranginess is the gold traces going down the middle of the probe into the brain tissue. And I'm not going to try and play this video, but as the brain wobbles, you can see the probe move with it. So you get very stable neurons because the probe wobbles with the brain. And what we can then do from that is we can do what in machine learning land is called zero-shot decoding. So zero-shot decoding works out of the box without new calibration on an individual patient. That is how you make that level of AI. That is what you do to make a product out of a BCI. And we have published this. It is about to come out in the NeurIPS Brain Body Foundation Models Workshop, which is in San Diego in 3 or 4 weeks. The paper will be online on their website in the next week or two. If you follow our LinkedIn, you'll find it quite soon. So this study is wrapped up. Importantly, no device-related adverse events, excellent neural data in all subjects, able to do zero-shot consciousness decoding. In this case, consciousness is modeled by the state of anesthesia of the patient. One of our patients transitioned from unconscious to conscious for their functional neurosurgery during the course of the implantation. As we talked about, this is the AI portion of the talk, so I'm not now going to talk about reimbursement or regulatory. I'm going to talk about data and strategy. With this, what we are aiming to do is get this zero-shot decoding in new patients. And obviously, a coma patient, you can't do any daily calibration. You can't wake up and say, hey, think about saying, you know, this calibration sentence. Now I can work out exactly what you meant and train in which neurons I'm using today. You only have to work immediately straight away. And so with that, by using multimodal data, single neurons across cortical layers in deep brain regions and superficial regions alongside LFP, we're able to get multi-region, multi-subject, multi-task decoding. And that's what's in the paper. Additionally, with this, as we scale this data, we believe we can make this work zero-shot for the much more difficult heterogeneous population of patients with diffuse brain injuries. And this is where our data strategy comes in. So right now, we are, the product is called Mind. Mind will go to market first for monitoring and diagnosis disorders of consciousness. With clinical research next year in 2026, this means that we'll get 10,000 hours of brain data about different states of consciousness. With our early feasibility study in 2027, we'll get about 20,000 hours. And when we're on market in 2028, we'll be talking 200,000 hours. This is important because sorry to preempt one of your questions, Jojo, but what we've seen in the last 2 years in neurotech and AI is that we've suddenly found the scale of data at which zero-shot decoding becomes possible in brain decoding. There have been a series of papers that have come out, Neural Data Transformer, POYO, POYO Plus, that have shown that when you hit these depending on your architectural choices, hundreds to thousands of hours, you can start to do one-shot or zero-shot decoding in new patients. You can even do zero-shot decoding from like monkeys to humans. We've shown zero-shot decoding from rats to pigs to humans in the paper that's coming out in NeurIPS. So when we hit these kinds of scales of data, we should be able to do this zero-shot performance for these patients. And at Axoft, these 2026 and 2027 clinical data milestones are going to be delivered from our Series A, which we signed the term sheet for last week.
What are some of the common themes that you're hearing? Do you hear, don't tell me about AI, or if you're not pitching me AI, I'm not investing? Are there things that you're seeing that are common in your experiences? Just tap the button at the bottom.
Andreas here with Cognition. I'll just jump in. You know, what we learned is that there's an awful lot of money out there flying around, going into lots of suspect kind of things. And so what we realized was it was not about the money for us in fundraising. It was around who's the right partner, who's the right person. Ultimately, you know, your VC partners are going to be your partner. You're basically interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because you're pretty much married. And so you really want to get that right. You know, and so obviously if they can have the right ticket size and the right stage and all those other things, that makes a lot of sense. So for us though, there's the chemistry with the partner, but then second to that is, because of the work we're doing, you're either a health tech investor or a deep tech investor or both. And sometimes that might come on different stages. So what we've looked at is, given the stage we're at, we're primarily focused on deep tech lead investors with health tech co-investors because of the stage of the company. Now, later, when we have an abundance of applications built on our platform, that will likely shift to much more towards healthcare investors because they can add value to what we're doing.
How about Tatiana? You've been out there the most recently, I think, with your close.
You know, it's interesting. I realized that when we were fundraising, it was exactly a year ago, and it was already an AI boom. But out of, I don't know, 60 maybe calls with the partners of different VC firms, I've never ever heard the question about AI. And that's, I mean, that's great because most of the question that I've been asked was specifically about BCI, about our vision, FDA strategy, product strategy, go to market, etc. But luckily, nobody never asked me about AI.
Right. And go ahead, Oliver, if you have something. I'm not in the habit. Not everybody has to answer every question. So
I think people ask a lot about how you're like building a data moat is important and how your product and disease strategy aligns with giving you that kind of data moat.
And so, Oliver, I'll start with you on this one. What has fundamentally changed in the last 24 months that makes this moment in technology and investing and in healthcare, neurotech different from the years before?
I think we understand where the tractable threshold of getting that sizable jump in performance so that you can go from needing calibration to not needing calibration is. We see that in the academic literature. We see that in recent products. If anyone saw the Meta control band that came out with their smart glasses, that was the result of an acquisition of Control Labs, an EMG wrist-worn device back in 2017. They paid, I think, 750 million for. And they've done a huge amount of work. They put out a paper earlier in 2024 where they showed the scaling graph. And basically, when they got to 6,000 patients of training data, they could do zero-shot handwriting decoding. And then about a year later, you see the product come out, right? So I think we're now seeing in this like exact moment in time where the tractable threshold for doing this at scale to go from research product to product is.
I would say that for us and how I see it is we get into the critical mass of articles, the academic articles that proves that a lot of things that we were hoped for is really working. For example, a couple of weeks ago in our industry, I mean, magnetoelectrical nanoparticles, they've been an article from Christian Kozalski and other guys that showed that basically magnetoelectrical nanoparticles that we are working with are safe in mice for 18 months. And that's amazing for us. So from my perspective, we reached to the critical mass of proof from academia.
I would say that, you know, in 2017 to 2020, we had to educate the market on, we had to teach people what ALS is. And I was speaking earlier about COVID was a natural education tailwind for us in the sense that everybody around the world saw the effects of like losing your ability to speak and do things. And we didn't have to really teach people about the size of the market anymore. I think everybody just intuitively realizes like, okay, enough people are saying your market size is X, Y, and Z. I believe that, move on. Meanwhile, a lot of the early VCs had sort of placed their BCI bets. And now what I'm seeing is much more sort of mainstream investors coming in, building their neurotech thesis. And they're still not all in, but they're definitely beyond kicking the tires, right? They're coming in and saying, I really want to put an allocation into one or two companies in the field and go. So I think that's very encouraging.
Okay, so Andreas, I'm going to start with you on this one because we've got two wearables and an implanted solution, but I can also count on you for saying something controversial if I really push you. So China's investing aggressively in not only AI, but neurotech and the combination thereof. So are we prepared for the possibility that not only China could be the first to market with a scalable BCI solution, but they could even potentially do it using our own technologies or our own IP?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to sort of answer that in a couple of ways. One, a couple of years ago, there's a few people in the room that were also with us there. I wasn't there. Our CTO was there in Washington. We were invited. There was a cohort of BCI companies invited to the Department of Commerce, and they were talking about import-export controls on BCI. So Google it. You'll find out about it. So it's a very hot topic in DC around whether our technology sort of gets out of the US and how it's used. China is aggressively investing in their own BCI technologies, their own universities. We've seen certain lab directors at universities that we used to collaborate with that have been poached out of Canadian and US universities to move back to China and set up labs with infinite budgets. So they are very motivated to sort of try and win at this. In the DOC example, the Department of Commerce, it's just quid pro quo, right? So if we can't export to China, we're not going to likely be importing from China either. So there's going to be a bit of a firewall, I think, in the market size. So China can dominate China, but it's going to be hard for China to dominate the US, right?
Oliver, from the implanted perspective, do you have thoughts on this?
I mean, I think we kind of have to learn from our biotech colleagues, right? Like the advantage China has is in speed of clinical, right? They can take a single technology and then from the top down align everyone's incentives along the stack to do clinical incredibly fast. What that's seen in biotech, the market is still here. What we've seen in biotech is that that's meant people have taken an early stage preclinical technology, done the first in human within that first year after inventing it, and then it gets bought up. So I think that we will leverage some of those technologies and they will probably get bought up. I think we'll see some cross-border transactions.
Okay. I'm a stickler for time and I want to make sure the audience has an opportunity. Are there questions? I left you 2 minutes, so you can have, on gym time, that's easily 3 questions. And that's the first time I've picked on you today. David? I'm growing.
Question for Oliver on the fluoride. Quick question. What's the time of life on the cortical tissue? And then what's the explant vision for fluoride?
So the longest we've done is we've had rats go out to 18 months with cortical fluoron implants with no adverse immune response. Then they were just too old as rats. And explant, those rats have also been explanted at that time. So the device slides out of the brain tissue when you want it to.
So Andreas, how do you explant?
How did you know I have one?
I'm just kidding. Is there another audience question? Yeah. Rob Franklin, The Independent.
So we've seen some major advances in AI over the last couple of years and just how the public is aware of it and the knowledge that's available. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on whether there's anything surprising that we will learn as we start to build these foundation models that you're talking about and start to integrate AI more carefully with BCI.
I can start. To be honest, we have some idea in our company how we can use AI in terms of material science and in terms of synthesis. And we haven't started this project yet, like preliminary, but this is something that may accelerate things a lot in our development. If AI would help us to synthesize nanoparticles the best way we can get.
I think the most surprising thing that is probably the biggest opportunity. Someone, I don't remember who said earlier that, there are not going to be many single molecule, single receptor treatments from drugs to some of these more complicated neurological disorders, like migraine, depression, mental health, which are circuit level disorders characterized by dysfunction of activity between brain regions as they talk to each other. I think the biggest opportunity, and I mean, we don't know what we don't know, but the most surprising thing is how we can leverage different combinations of therapies to give you circuit level responses rather than receptor level responses, which brings into play all of the neurological conditions being poorly treated by small molecules right now.
I think what I'm fascinated by is, if you think about the localization of a sensor, you're really listening to like that spot on the brain, right? And it takes a tremendous amount of money and resources and time for every one of these implantable BCI companies or any BCI company to get enough data from one region of the brain. And you become a master of, the rose garden or the tulip garden, but you don't become the master of the whole field. And so I think it's sort of a question of broad brain mapping of how do we have interoperability and standards around data and models broadly. There's certain companies that have an ambitious goal of sort of doing all the brain mapping and others which are doing sort of pieces and parts. And I think from an ecosystem perspective, it would behoove us to try and normalize some data and understanding around total cortical brain mapping to see what's the same versus what's different. Because I don't think there's a lot of hype around like creating foundational brain models, like, you know, like you're in the sagittal sinus, like how much brain mapping can you do on the visual cortex from there? I don't know. I doubt it.
None.
And I think we have one last question, Zach.
Yeah, Zach from Inspire. Really cool talk and panel. I think this was a good lead-in that you just said about the data and the data transferability, but you're collecting tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands of hours of data. You know, as a startup company, you have limited bandwidth with what to do with that data. Are you thinking about how to create a marketplace for that data? Are you thinking about how to acquire data that can be transferred into your product from other places? Because in AI, you know, the data and the algorithm are kind of the key to your outcome. So how are you thinking about the data use?
I can't speak for these guys, but for us, like we launched a research product only with non-commercial rights on the terms of service so that people could go to bare metal access and do whatever they want with the data. We just have the right to look at it. When we get through the FDA, that data standards and policies will change dramatically and will be much more narrowly defined to the endpoint of the app itself versus the sensor. So I think it really just kind of comes down to the app. Like what app do you want it to do, right? So if you want an exoskeleton control app, or you just want to understand a new kind of biomarker for a disease, the data will sort of, how you manage that data will be different.
Great. Like I said, we're just over time. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time and input. Thank you.